This is what was in the New York Times. But let me tell you, it was all over the UK papers, all right, from May 11th, all right? This is from the Sunday Times. Scientists have created what is believed to be the first genetically modified GM human embryo.
Uh-oh.
A team from Cornell University in New York produced the GM embryo to study how early cells and diseases develop. It was destroyed after 5 days. The British regulator, the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority, all right, has warned that such controversial experiments cause large ethical and public interest issues. No kidding.
Playing God.
So here we are. We're going to talk about genetically modified foods. All right. Now, my goodness, I was just like, wow. I mean, I'm not really surprised, but they came public with it, you know?
Well, that means if they went public, that means it's much farther than that.
Right.
You know, because they usually don't release the information that's just like pertinent at that moment.
Yep.
Well, this is exactly what we're doing right here and now. No, they're usually a few weeks ahead of that at least.
Yep. My goodness.
Well, you know, that's the whole thing about genetically modified foods in the first place is, and this ties into what we've talked about like with Auntie Lola in secret societies and psychological warfare and that whole genre of, you know, doing rituals in front of the public and they don't even know it. It's like man versus nature. And once again, man is trying to control nature instead of working with nature.
Well, this is mind control, and we've talked about it, and it continues, and that's why you people have to wake up to these ideas, because otherwise you're going to only understand through other people's eyes. And the cool thing is when you can really see it for yourself in action, the New World Order expanding. And
into everything. And what's really scary about the GMOs is because, see, now, since 1974 was the first time ever a living organism was actually allowed to have a patent. Prior to that, they never would allow living things to be patented because no one should have the right to control life in that respect.
Well, and there lies the incentive, right? You create a food, put a patent on it, no one else can make it, and then they're capitalized on it.
You can make a lot of money off of that, and they have it. And I would have to assume at this point that it's starting to pay off. But what's happening now is that opened the floodgate to patent everything. Now, Monsanto has over 11,000 patents on seeds. Anything, and it doesn't even have to be genetically modified. So they have a patent on a corn seed that God made, or nature made, depending on how you want to look at it.
Well, isn't this part of the World Health Organization to get all seeds so that when you buy a seed, it's only going to work for one season? They're going to have total control of the food throughout the world.
Absolutely. You know,
so what's happening, this is, once again, incrementalism at its best.
Yeah, and you know, sadly enough, that is called the Terminator gene. Yeah. You know, where the next generation, they can try and plant it, and it will grow, you know, to a seedling, and then it'll perform a poison, it'll produce a poison and die. Now, the thing is, though, and this is happening when they've released some of these genetically modified organisms into nature, it becomes uncontrolled. And there is the story of, what's his name, Percy Schmeiser out of Canada, Saskatchewan, Canada. He was sued by Monsanto for having Roundup Ready canola in his field, which is a product of Monsanto.
And the funny thing is, folks, he didn't plant it there.
No, he didn't. It got in there by a truck driving by, was a big portion of it, carrying seed. The tarp fell off and spread a lot of seed.
Imagine that.
And that is not the only time. I mean, farmers across the country in the United States have also been sued by Monsanto.
And you get this.
Because somehow the pollen had gotten in, the seed maybe carried from a bird, who knows exactly how it got there.
Right.
And that does not matter. The fact is, the courts have ruled that because it is Monsanto's patented property, they have a right to be paid for the use of that seed. Although they did not, you know, the people who are being sued did not try to do anything illegal. Most of them were actually very cooperative with Monsanto and allowed them to come on and check their, you know, take samples and all this, and then they found out, hey, this stuff is Roundup Ready, now you owe us money. Now the good news in all of that is that Percy Schmeiser did not give in to Monsanto. Now they did find in favor of Monsanto in the original lawsuit, but he countersued them for damages to his property, because now since it is Monsanto's property, that means they have the legal liability to not damage anybody else's property, and hence Monsanto now is responsible for cleaning up all of that off of his property and other farmers too.
Yep. So, Bud,
which was an interesting thing.
Throughout your research, did you come across the percentage of our foods that are being genetically modified?
Well, actually, at this time, it wasn't as much as I had thought. The thing is though, what does most of our food consist of? Corn, soy, cotton, and...
Soy is the number one.
Right, and then corn. Over 100 million acres in this country are developed using genetically modified foods.
Yep.
You know, there's some scary things about the GM foods too, is like, okay, so they only work with certain pesticides. But the thing is, also they build in pesticides into these plants that they will produce their own pesticides. So that means, okay, it's not being sprayed necessarily on the top of the food, now it's actually growing into the food. So you're eating it regardless of how much you wash it or anything like that.
I went onto this nice web page here. It's called EarthSave. You know, just say no to GMOs. The power to make a difference is on your plate, folks. And, you know, what is genetically engineered food? All living things contain genes. Genes contain information that helps shape how each living things work. In genetic engineering, new genes are added that come from a different kind of living thing. A gene may be added to a plant from an animal. So, in comes we were talking about.
Yeah, blowfish being combined with a tomato to try and make it more resistant to cold.
All kinds of allergy, toxicity, and you know, altered nutritional values. Geez, you know, when Phil Angel from Monsanto, he's the director of corporate communications at Monsanto, when he was asked a question about, you know, should they, you know, give verification for scientific data. Monsanto, this is what he said, folks. Monsanto should not have to vouchsafe the safety of biotech food. Our interest is in selling as much of it as possible. Professor Richard Lewington, professor of genetics, Harvard University, says this: an ecosystem, you can always intervene and change something in it, but there's no way of knowing what all the downstream effects will be or how it might affect the environment. We have such a miserably poor understanding of how the organism develops from its DNA that I would be surprised if we don't get one rude shock after another. And that's just one quote. I could give you a whole list.
You know, we've mentioned different scientists who have brought up detrimental things about fluoride, you know, or aspartame, and once they go public with this, they get fired from their jobs. And another example is a Dr. Pouzet out of France who did, he fed developing rats on a 10-day diet of genetically modified potatoes. In his control group, he fed them just regular potatoes, the exact same diet. And after 10 days, he examined the GMO rats, and he found that they all had weakened and underdeveloped immune systems, problems with their gallbladders, hearts, livers, a whole bunch of different organ deformities.
Hey, thanks to the FDA, there's no labeling necessary.
No,
you know?
Because then there's no liability, because you cannot trace it back to that. And that's one of the things we pointed out too, like with the fluoride. You know, when they start wanting to introduce these things, the first thing they do is to protect themselves from liability, because we are guinea pigs.
Buzz, there's genocide going on in this country.
No doubt about it.
You know?
Georgia Guidestones, 500 million population.
And we're just anesthetized to it. We're hypnotized, and you know, we're just taking all these big farmers. You know, there's modern sorcerers of today, and everybody's just, you know, taking their prescriptions, and they're hypnotized to the reality of what we're talking about. Fluoride in your water. You know, and it's like, now we got to introduce to you, you know, Dr. Len Horowitz. All right, and what we're going to talk about briefly was Denver Airport. Now, folks, you know, this is the plan for globalism. You got to see what's going on here. Now,
DIA.
You know, DIA, it's a Masonic temple. Now, in the big hall, there's all these murals. In the big hall, it's what the lodges, the Masonic lodges call themselves their meeting room, the big hall. In the big hall, in the, what is it, the World Airport, according to the...
oh, yeah, they call it the New World Airport.
New World Airport, according to the Masons. It's a Masonic airport. Cost $4.8 billion. There's speculation that there's underground
bunkers or something like that, storage facilities.
Anyway, you know, you better make sure you tune in next week. Now, what's the name of that program, Mr. Horowitz?
Death in the Air.
Oh, Death in the Air. Yes,
globalism, folks. Terrorism, the economy, something to that effect.
Folks, tune in next week, and we're going to show you Len Horowitz, and we're going to horrify you, because if you think we've been talking out of our buttholes all season about, you know, the toxins and everything that we're eating, drinking, and breathing, Tune in next week. But right now, check out this little segment here with Dr. Len Horowitz talking about the murals in the Denver International Airport. Peace to you people. Stop bitching, start a revolution. Here's the reason why.
See you next week.